Direct from our newsroom here in Colombo, bringing you face-to-face this evening. I'm Jayamal Ratnayaka for the Newsfirst team. It's exactly 1 month until Sri Lanka will go to the polls on the 21st of September to elect a new president, the 9th executive president of Sri Lanka. And to discuss all of this and much more, what is being said, what is being done by presidential hopefuls on the political stage, we have invited to our studios tonight no strangers to the show, and two individuals who are very vocal about societal and political matters. They are none other than Attorney at Law Lihini Fernando representing the SJB and Attorney at Law Lakmali Hemachandra representing the National People's Power. A very good evening to you, ladies. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and joining us on the show. So before we head into the nitty-gritty of today's conversation, I would just like to ask Lihini and Lakmali how preparations are ongoing for the political campaigns, for the presidential hopefuls. How are the voter or rather the turnout that you are witnessing at your respective political campaigns? Lihini, I am aware that the Colombo district's first campaign will be held in Morotua, if I am correct, tomorrow. On the 22nd? Yes. So can you just brief us about how the preparations are going, how everything is falling in place for your election, and thereafter we can direct the same question to Lakmali.
Yeah, so SJB campaign is on full swing. So I would say the campaign is segmented into different parts. We are having a ground level campaign where you see the presidential aspirant Mr. Sajid Premudas going and addressing various rallies, and we see an unprecedented level of crowd turnover for these events, and also those crowds are from the respective areas. So we can see that the ground level is turning towards SJB, and they see the vision that he has, and also he being an empathetic leader, he being more sensitive towards the people's needs, and also people have taken cognizance of the things that he has done as the opposition leader. So that itself is the sentiments of the ground level is turning towards SJB. And also we have launched our education policy, the digital policy, and also we've launched the tourism and civil aviation policy of the SJB. So going forward, the many of the other policies will also be launched. We are having the YPO symposium, then the National Visionary Summit, which is happening, which was held, it was on the 20th of August.
Right.
And then we are having many policy launches thereafter. So we are having different events catering to the business community, the young professionals. So it is, and also then the ground level activation is also happening, where door-to-door canvassing. So I think on a full scale,
firing on all cylinders, I see. So Lakmali, if I direct the same question to you, how the National People's Power has mobilized its resources in preparation for the upcoming presidential election. How are the turnouts like? What sort of policies and what sort of events have you organized for the presidential hopeful and also the candidates, I believe the voters to make a decision on who to vote for on the 21st of September? So if you can brief us as well.
Yeah, so I think basically the same thing, but we've also had several political meetings, massive political rallies. Very recently in Kiribati, and there was one in Tangol. Massive turnout. It's unbelievable turnout. And we've also had smaller meetings all around the country with different segments, different groups of people, and door-to-door canvassing again. Door-to-door canvassing, I think, is unbelievable for NPP, because you see a lot of people from the community joining the door-to-door canvassing process. And I mean, it's at an uncontrollable level, that people from the same village coming together and trying to, sometimes it's just hundreds of people going campaigning. And we've also launched several policies throughout the past few months. And very recently we launched the digital policy, and then R&D policy. And then I think we are going to launch the economic policy and so on in the future. And yeah, so same thing. We're going to launch policies and have big political rallies.
Right, so similar sort of preparations taking place when it comes to the SJB and the National People's Power in the lead up to the 21st of September, where Sri Lanka will go to the polls to elect their next president. But I want to go into a particular topic today, because this story or this topic has been floating around for quite some time, and I believe it has now reached a pinnacle where it needs to be addressed. I am of course talking about moral decay in society. We know no matter how developed a country is economically, if the social fabric or social values and principles are not up to standard, a country cannot progress. And we heard a very disturbing account recently where a schoolgirl, an underage schoolgirl, had been gang raped by her own schoolmates, and allegedly with the involvement of elders and teachers as well. And this, Lihini and Lakmali, I believe, is not an isolated incident. This has been pervasive, and it has now turned into a cancer of sorts that is threatening the very social fabric of our country that is holding it together. And in a country like Sri Lanka, what do you believe needs to be done? Because we know legislation is in place, although it is not being executed effectively. So if I may start with Lihini first and then go to Lakmali, what needs to be addressed here? How can we ensure that our daughters are, our young women and our ladies are protected from physical and sexual abuse of this nature?
I think it's a state's responsibility to ensure that the citizens of the country, their security, their well-being is safeguarded. It's not just about having laws, legislatures, laws in place, but you know, the laws must be operative, laws must be executed, and the law enforcement authorities also must act. But here we see Sri Lanka more or less is a lawless society at the moment. I mean, if you see, apart from this incident, like if you see the president of this country, is he a person who respects the law, is also a question when the whole scenario of the IGP issue, when he himself challenged the Supreme Court decision. So I mean, you know, if the leader of the country is not setting the stage right, will the law enforcement authorities down below, will they act? So I mean, all these things, you know, this is a very sad incident, but these things are a result of series of events that has happened in this country throughout the years, and those things also not being addressed. Now, for example, in this country, the notion is that you can do anything and get away with anything. You know, justice is delayed, justice denied, we say that. So I mean, if you take the case, the time duration for a case for somebody to be prosecuted, I mean, it's years. I mean, you sent certain afterwards, when you send it to Attorney General's department for them to revert with their findings, it takes years. I mean, so you know, sometimes individuals who are raped, when the case is actually heard, the child born out of that is about 7 to 8 years in age. I mean, what are we talking? How do you ensure justice is served on people? So I think, you know, society in Sri Lanka, culturally also we have failed, morally we have failed, and legally also we have failed. So I think, you know, this particular presidential election is also another platform for people of this country to understand which leader will ensure that Sri Lanka is driven in a lawful manner, which leader is serious to drive that, which is what the people of this country must also take into cognizance.
So Lihini, as you said, has the SJB led by Sajith Premadasa, your presidential candidate, taken into account this moral decay and the importance of ensuring that the rule of law is upheld? Every single citizen, starting from the first citizen, which is the president, follows the rule of law, abides by the law, and ensures that perpetrators, whoever they are brought to justice. Have you taken this into account?
Very much, because I mean, Mr. Sajith Premadasa, he's been always an advocate of you know, women's rights, children's rights. He has spoken on many platforms, stood up for women's rights, creating that safe space for women. He was one of his paramount importance, is of paramount importance to him, but because back in 2019 when he ran for office, he was one of the first to put out a women's charter. In that he said very specifically, a commission for women must be established, laws relating to equality, gender equality, then equal rights, all of that must be ensured, a safe environment for women. Then we've spoken about the apparel sector women, the migrant woman, then the estate woman, then about social issues, microfinancing issues, you know, and also safety of women, transportation. So I mean, the entire gamut relating to women was addressed. So I mean, we ensure that we will create that safe space for women in this country, because it is in his heart, and also the children. I mean, it's evident what he has done as the opposition leader to I mean, providing certain school equipment through his Sakwala programs for children's education. So it is one of the key things and one of the priorities of the SJB government in the future.
Understood. Lakmali, if I direct the same question to you, what the NPP has taken into account when it comes to safeguarding women and children in Sri Lanka, what sort of policies are being mobilized and put into do the works to ensure that women and children in our country are safeguarded and their representation is also given fair representation in our society. Can you just elaborate on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, specifically on the incident that you were referring to earlier, I think it's very unfortunate. This issue of violence against women, I don't think it's limited to Sri Lanka. I think it's a global issue now. I think,
yes, we saw a similar story in India also happening recently.
And all over the world. I think we're seeing a surge in, I mean, if you even look at the US elections, one of the main issues that is being contested is women's rights. So I think violence against women is a really serious issue that we have not addressed in Sri Lankan politics.
Right.
And if you look at the places where laws are made and where, you know, women should be respected, women should be given that recognition. Parliament, for example. Parliament had its own set of issues with how women were treated inside the parliament. So I think what we need to, I mean, in Talamanville, these are basically, I'm assuming, underage kids who are, you know, assaulting their own classmate. So what we need to remember is people are, especially children, are looking at what these elders are doing. And you need to, you know, set a clear precedent of good behavior and, you know, respect towards women, which is non-existent in Sri Lankan politics. It's almost game to say anything to women. So I want to highlight that. As you know, as people who are involved in politics, I think women also have a responsibility to stand up for themselves, and men also have the responsibility to sort of respect their own colleagues, which we don't see. As NPP, I think we take the issue of violence and harassment against women as a very serious issue. I think Sri Lankan legal system has largely ignored this issue. I think it's the impunity against crimes committed against women and children is astounding. It's, you know, heartbreaking almost, because as a lawyer, I have been in cases where you have to just, you know, it's unbelievable where you have the things that you have to see and witness when something against women are brought forward to the justice system even. So I think it needs a complete, complete reforms are required to the system, to the legal system, and to the way the police operates, to the way the hospitals operate, to the way the schools operate, to make sure that women and children are protected, especially underage children are protected. So NPP takes it very seriously, and we think it's essential that violence and harassment against women is handled, and there should be strict laws against that. And most importantly, there has to be laws that will center victims in the discourse, without just, you know, giving more power to the culprits and the perpetrators, which we have been doing, not just politically in terms of how we represent people, but also, you know, in terms of inside the legal system. We have an IGP who's accused of torture, who was basically determined by the Supreme Court was responsible for torture. So when you have that level of impunity, how are you going to protect people from violence and harassment? That's not going to work. So I think handling impunity, making sure that laws are basically enforced against people who are in power is very important to protect women. I mean, because women and children are the most vulnerable at the end of the day, right? They'll be at the receiving end of this injustice and impunity. And the more you let this take place, the more you let this basically corrupt the society. It's going to make sure, it's just going to make it worse for women. So like you said, you know, it's getting worse because our system is getting worse. And obviously, the most vulnerable, the weakest are going to be the first victims. That is what we are seeing right now.
Right. So, Lihini, sticking to the same topic, I want to move towards women empowerment, female representation as well. But because this matter has gained large-scale attention globally, locally, and so on, I want to ask you, where do we start as a nation to address this problem? Because we know that with the 21st century being the digital era, there is a proliferation of pornographic content which is available to children, to adults, anyone alike, and thereby festers a sense of entitleism, or it might give a rise to misogyny. We know with Sri Lankan culture and society, that is what happens, and it essentially desensitizes someone to be aware of another person's feeling, particularly a woman. So where do we start as a society or as a government to address this problem? Do we start at our homes, in our schools, or in the legislature? Where do we start?
I think women are 52% of the population. I know it is hard to say this, but there are gendered roles in this country. Not overall, there are gendered roles, but when it comes to women, women are framed into the gendered role, and so women have to play a career woman, a mother, a wife. Whilst doing that, they have to do the other aspects as well. If you're entering into politics, that too. But but society and also the state, has it supported women enough whilst managing these gendered roles to do more? So in Sri Lanka, we see employment, women employment is only 30 to 35%.
Yes.
Has the state done enough to support women to get into labor participation? No. I mean, in terms of whilst doing these gendered roles, how can they contribute to the economy? So these are aspects that has not been addressed. Then also, if you take women in representation, in decision making, though we are 52%, we are in parliament, we are just about 5.6%. So who is actually talking for women out there? Then if you take the budgets, then we have gender sensitive budgeting in Sri Lanka? No. And then we have ratified CEDAW conventions. Year on year we send shadow reports to that, but then there are certain indices that we need to comply, but we just tick the boxes, but in actual are we in fact implementing? So I think overall yes, there are women, but it's just that women are being used. I would say women, the support system for women the state has not provided. So it is actually, if you take in general, it is a real struggle. And also, like, then we want women, more and more women to come into politics, more and more women to take center stage in decision making. But then if the system doesn't support, if it's a very patriarchal society that you and I are living, how do you expect women to take that center stage? I mean, we do not talk about we also, then again, there's you objectify women, then there's sexism when it comes to addressing about women, even media reporting about women. So I think overall the respect for women in Sri Lanka has eroded. I think overall respect for citizens overall has eroded, and then women also it has eroded greatly. So I think our society needs a complete cultural change. We need to go back to our roots, and we need to see what is the Sri Lanka. Is it an ethical society that we are building? I mean, we talk about observing Sil on Poe days. I mean, we are talking about very religious rites. I mean, but then, are we living the religion? If you are living the religion, can we do such injustice to women and pass such derogatory statements and of that nature? So I think you need to take a complete overhaul, a complete change in all these things are required. So for that also, the leadership of this country matters. How the leader of this country perceives a woman, respecting a woman's rights. It's not just on paper but in practice. Will you allocate your budgets to ensure that you create a better society for a woman? Will you bring in laws? Will you change the labor laws? Will you bring in work from home regulations? Then put in place support structures. Exactly. Daycare, regularized daycares. Yes. Then also preschool education. Then why just maternity leave? Why not bring paternity leave? Things like that. Will the state also support organizations, private sector organizations in their maternity leave, extend those and understand about child psychology, mental health? So I mean, I can go on and on. But I think, overall we are in 2024, but these issues have not been addressed. Hence, we are here as a society. So I think it all boils down to the leader. And also, these are also as a result of who was governing Sri Lanka before. I mean, in this country, people thought development was concrete development, having the Lotus Towers and kilometers and kilometers of highways. That is what you thought development. You never thought people's development, people's prosperity, happiness, creating a justful society, lawful society. You never saw those things as contributing towards development. So I think overall in this country, people must this whole turnaround
the
needs to
people
come.
themselves have to
change,
believe
and but
that the onus
the
on-
leaders must direct the people. The leaders must direct. So again, lawlessness must be, you know, how do you eradicate lawlessness? How do you eradicate corruption? Or not eradicate, but at least how do you know curb those? How do you ensure that we have a lawful society as opposed to a lawless society?
Understood. So we are in conversation with Attorney at Law Lihini Fernando and Lakmali Hemachandra. However, we have to cross over for a short commercial break. Do stay tuned to Face to Face. We will be right back.
Newsfirst, Face to Face with Jamal Ratnayaka.
Shakti Crown Grand Finale.
To vote for Sitsa Bison, SC space number 7 and send it to 7788.
ජනප්‍රිය ගායන ශිල්පිනී නෙල්කා තිලිනිගේ නවතම ගීතය Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube ඇතුළු ඔබගේ ප්‍රියතම සංගීත සේවාවන් හරහා රස විඳින්න.
M Entertainments.
அன்பென்ற ஒற்றை சொல்லை போலொன்று வேறு இல்லை, நீ காட்டும் பாசத்திற்கு தெய்வங்கள் ஈடு இல்லை. என் நெஞ்சம் உன்னை மட்டும் கடிகாரம் உள்ளாய் சுற்றும், நொடி நேரம் நீ பிரிந்தால் மாடி உயிரே போகும். நீ சொன்னால் எதையும் செய்வேன், தலையாட்டும் பொம்மையாவே. செத்தாலும் புதைத்தாலும் செடியாக முளைத்தாலும் என் வாசம் உனக்கல்லவோ.
Shakti Crown Grand Finale.
Akash Mathan, SC space number 12 and send it to 7788.
ජනප්‍රිය ගායන ශිල්පිනී නෙල්කා තිලිනිගේ නවතම ගීතය Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube ඇතුළු ඔබගේ ප්‍රියතම සංගීත සේවාවන් හරහා රස විඳින්න.
M Entertainments. Shakti Crown Grand Finale.
Pranavi, SC space number 13 and send it to 7788.
සිම්පත හරියට ලියාපදිංචි කරගෙන තියෙන්න ඕන. සමහරවිට දන්නෙත් නැහැනේ.
මේ සිම්පතක් කොයිතරම් වැදගත්ද කියලා මේ දුරකථන පාවිච්චි කරන හැම දෙනාම දන්නේ නැහැ කියලා තමයි මම කියන්නේ.
මැයිවලින් පස්සේ ලොකු ගංවතුර තත්ත්වයක් එන්න නියමිතයි කියලා කාලගුණ විද්‍යාඥයින් අනතුරු අංගවන පසුබිමක ඔබ කොයි විදිහටද මේ අපේ තෙත්බිම් සම්බන්ධයෙන් දකින්නේ?
කොළඹ නගරයේ තියෙන නාගරික තෙත්බිම් වලින් 21%ක් තියෙන නාගරික තෙත්බිම් වලින් වැසි ජලයෙන් 39%ක් රඳවා ගන්න බව.
දැන් විලත් නගරයේ කටයුතු කරන කට්ටිය දැන් එනවා පරිපාලන නගරයට. ඔතුමේ දන්නවා හැටි අපි ගත්තොත් අලවතු කොට. එහෙම නැත්නම් කිඹුලවල ප්‍රදේශයේ අපිට තියෙනවා රැයට කෑම කඩ. ඉස්සර එක තිබ්බ කොහෙද? කොළඹ. දැන් ගොඩ දෙනෙක් මේ පැත්තට එන්න පටන් ගන්නවා. මොකද ඒගොල්ලන්ට අර පොළ පාට ගතිය. මේ තියෙන බ්‍රීස් එක කියන්නේ ඇඟට දැනෙන වෙනස අනිවාර්යෙන් දැනෙනවා.
ජාතික මෙහෙවර සතියේ දිනවල උදෑසන 11ට.
Newsfirst, Face to Face with Jamal Ratnayaka.
Welcome back to Face to Face. We are in conversation with Attorney at Law Lihini Fernando and Attorney at Law Lakmali Hemachandra representing the SJB and the National People's Power respectively. So Lakmali, before we crossed over to the break, Lihini was talking about female representation, support structures, the importance of the leader being committed towards providing an equal platform for female representation in society. And I was doing some research prior to tonight's show, and I found out that the literacy rate of Sri Lankan women stands at 92.3%. and 1.4% of female students for every one male student is enrolled in tertiary education. But the contrasting factor is workplace participation stands at just 31.8%, like Lihini mentioned before the break. So talk to me and viewers about what the NPP plans to do to bring up policies that will ensure women can take on multiple roles, but they will be supported by society, by the state, to thrive in those roles, and also to be given equal representation, a seat at the table, to be heard, and to be a part of governing bodies and decision-making bodies, and so on. What are the principles, policies, frameworks that the NPP has been devising for this particular purpose?
So I think if you look at, I mean, what you said is actually, like, it's true that women are in education. When you look at education institutes, you see women in universities, but few years after universities, women disappear from workplaces, right? So what happens is women have to take up the role of homemakers. They have to attend to children. They have to make sure that, you know, children's education is taken care of, and they have to take care of the elderly. They have to take care of, you know, the sick. So this is the role that gradually becomes the life of women. And I think this is something that we don't talk about enough, what women do. I mean, it's not that these roles are less important. Like you said, these roles are important. I mean, you need education, you need health, you need somebody has to attend to children, elderly, and the sick. But why does it have to be women, right? That's a controversial question to ask, I'm sure, but I don't think it has to be women. I think a state should have, and NPP definitely is very mindful of unpaid care work that women do, and that is in the center of our policies on women. I'm sure many of you must have heard our leaders talking about unpaid care work. I think we have one of the few platforms that address this very important issue. So even men, I mean, credit to the women in NPP, really, because this is an issue that has not been discussed even by the party leadership a few years ago. But the more women talk about it, I feel everybody learns about it. And if you are under a good leadership, they will also learn about it and start talking about it. I think that is what's happening inside NPP. So even the male leadership is learning about it and starting the conversation and joining the conversation, which is very important. So I think the number one issue for women, which nobody talks about, is unpaid care work, that the work women do for no money. That doesn't mean that women have to be paid to take care of children and, you know, take care of their parents. That's not what we're trying to say, but that there has to be state policies designed towards incentivizing, supporting women. So, I mean, to take up what Lihini was saying earlier, like the private sector is, I mean, because I especially work with women in the private sector, especially low income earners. So private sector is not very friendly towards women generally, right? So then you need to incentivize the private sector. You need to have policies within the state that will incentivize the private sector to take more women into work, to make sure that they're retained in work,
and
that they can, and they're supported, that they can, you know, sometimes afford maternity leave, that they can give daycare facilities. All of this can be done through proper state policy making. This can be done through, you know, financial institutions. You can actually subsidize private sector that treats women better, gives more facilities to women, and it will actually include more women in the labor force. You can actually have special loan schemes for women entrepreneurs, small scale business owners who are women, who are struggling right now, who are basically, you know, they have lost their livelihoods, they are, you know, going under. So you can have certain policies that are designed towards supporting women. And about female representation, I think that is very important. You can't have these policies, I mean, with all due credit to men in every political party, I guess, especially in NPP, but I don't think these policies can be implemented if you don't have women in the highest positions talking about it and also making sure that they are implemented. So it's very important that, I mean, we have 3 male candidates leading the presidential election this time. I mean, hopefully that will change in the future, that there will be more women candidates
coming up in
and
elections.
and in the parliamentary elections also. I'm very hopeful that there will be more women in the nomination list from every political party, especially from NPP. I have high expectations, and high standards also, that there will be more women. And I think as women in politics, it is our job to make sure that it happens and make our leadership accountable and make them walk the talk. So that is important. And you asked why it should change for women. I think earlier I thought that question was very interesting, because I feel like it should change where we are right now. So coming from a legal background and also a political background, I think it's my job to make sure that where I stand has changed. So unless we do that, it won't change. So
change starts with us.
Yeah, starts with us, and with us initiating change.
Right.
So it's very important. As much as the state supports it, I think as people in politics, we need to make sure that we also drive it, and we are not just victims of the system. So I think that's what NPP's message to women is. They are not victims of the system. They can come forward, take part and change the system. That's our message to everybody, all the voters.
So I believe there was a significant policy shift in 2016 where they introduced a new policy to ensure 25% quota for women in local governments, and in 2018 women's representation in local government bodies surged to 29%. But unfortunately, when it comes to the apex legislative body in Sri Lanka, which is the parliament, only 5.4% of seats are occupied by women. So Lihini, what does the SJB envisage to change this system, to ensure that more women are brought into politics, more women are brought to the forefront of any sector, be it business, be it politics, be it any sort of sector? What does the SJB envision to do?
So as Lakmali said, come next election, you will see many females taking center stage in SJB as well, nomination lists. So I mean, yes, the legislature can put a figure like 25%, but you know, even without a figure there, if the party leadership truly believes in women representation, they can give that 25%. I mean, so we are hopeful that SJB will be doing that. I mean, it's SJB as a party respects women, wants women in
top positions,
and also has created that safe space for women. So you will see women representation in
a clear shift. Understood. So Lihini, the education sector has been the bedrock of opposition leader Sajith Premadasa's political campaign, starting with the Sakwala program, starting with the education forum that I believe you were also part of a couple of days ago. Can you just tell us what the SJB has in store, should it come to power, to ensure that primary, secondary and tertiary education in Sri Lanka is upgraded to meet international standards, and our students and our children are able to compete on a global level with international standards?
Yeah, so SJB recently launched its education policy titled Transforming Education Sri Lanka, strategic priorities for progressive and inclusive future. So overall our objective, vision is to create an equitable, inclusive and innovative education system in Sri Lanka that empowers all learners to achieve their full potential, preparing them for challenges in the 21st century while contributing to national development and global competitiveness. So the policy talks on many areas, many aspects. If I may briefly tell you, we talk about early childhood education, about, you know, regularizing early childhood education, teacher training, all that, preschools, daycare, primary education, secondary education. Then we talk about STEM learning, English education, digital learning, technology, AI education, and also holistic education, value-based education. Then teacher development and teacher support, how this must be brought in, and also the administration of education, how it needs to, you know, take a different outlook of it. Then about examination assessments and school infrastructural management, enhancing school facilities, talking about sanitary facilities in schools. Then and then we talk about institutional strengthening, transforming the national education institutes, good quality schools in different educational systems. Then school classifications, national education, zonal educational schools, then budgetary allocations. Then also talk about tertiary education, University Acts, how it should be reformed, zero tolerance towards ragging. Then private education, technical vocational training, then filling up gaps in skilled workforces, government systems funding. Then we also talk about the jobs 2030 and beyond.
The most in demand
most
jobs.
in demand, then skilled education. So all these, the policy document, a 26-page policy document.
It's all available
it's
online.
all available online, and we invite the general public to read these documents. I mean, I think this particular election, it is important that we evaluate the policies that are presented by political parties. I mean, one of the things the general public are thinking, you know, some are thinking that this is a protest vote, that this is, you know, some people have ruined the country, let's give it to some other party.
Let's take revenge on
let's take revenge. But, you know, you are playing with the education, you're playing with the future of the children, of your own children. I mean, you also got to see people who you appoint, whether they have the skill, the tech capability, whether they have the team to drive it. And also the policies. It's also not just about policy, but the experience that you have, the team that you have to drive these policies.
Understood.
Because you're not getting a country on a clean slate. It's not a clean utopia that you are getting in where you can build it from scratch. You need to have the experience.
There's so many creases that need to be ironed
Yes, and also how do you navigate the system? How do you work with the existing system?
Understood.
So you need to have an understanding of the government administration, the law. I mean, what you talk is one thing, what you do is one thing. So, you know, people of this country must, you know,
be mindful.
When they are voting, to who they are voting, because you are choosing your leader for the next 5 years.
Understood.
I mean, it is very important.
So, Lakmali, I want to pose the same question that I posed to Lihini, but with a slight tweak, because we know the National People's Power's constituent party is the JVP, and historically the JVP has been against the privatization of education. We have seen that over the past few years. So when it comes to the NPP, you portray yourselves as a more progressive force, as a more progressive alliance. So should the NPP come to power, will you allow privatization of education, of private universities to run, or will it be a full state-owned educational framework that will be in place? Can you just apprise me and the viewers on that as well?
I don't think privatization of education is necessarily a progressive policy, personally. And I think it blocks people from accessing education at a certain level. But NPP is very aware of the situation that we are in as a country, that the government cannot take on the full responsibility of
All
the full
students.
expenditure of, you know, the full expenditure that will take to
Of the student
support.
population,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. So while there won't be any rolling back of private universities, I don't think that's part of the plan. I mean, not that I don't think, I know that's not part of the plan.
Understood.
There will be regularization. There will be certain
Standards
set for prices and also for the quality of education institutes.
Okay.
Because I think that is a major problem in the private sector education, in universities and in schools also, where sometimes parents are charged massive fees, exorbitant fees, and they are not provided. I mean, I personally have friends who constantly complain about how schools are charging fees and not delivering on the other end. So I think those need to be regulated, and quality also, right? But NPP stresses that the responsibility of education lies with the state. The state has to make sure that children have access to primary education, tertiary education, and, you know, do everything that we can, depending on the access that we have to funds. We are in a very tight situation. It's a bankrupt country. We have to pay our debts. So we can't be very, you know, we can't be very ambitious about our fiscal policies, but we are still making sure that the state is very aware, that the party is also very aware that it is the primary responsibility of the state to provide education for all children on equal access basis. So I think that's very important. And like I said, I think privatization has had many, I don't think it's necessarily a good, I don't think we should further privatize education. I think we need to get investments into more productive areas, not into, you know, universities and schools where you're making money off our parents' backs, right? That's not how you should be making profits.
But rather channel those funds towards state schools and universities. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying we should channel private investments not into schools and universities, basically. State should take on that at the moment. But private capital should go into job creation, to more productive forces, not just into, you know, exploiting parents out of education can be done by the state, I feel. But there are areas that the state can't really do a lot of things in, especially like manufacturing. There are areas that state needs the support of the private sector. So private capital can be channeled into those areas. But quality and access to education in terms of the price is really important that the state takes on that and make sure that every child has equal access to education. And I think because you're interested about, on the last point I want to make, I think as a woman and as a girl who was the third child of a family, I feel very personally about this because I'm 100% sure if education was fully privatized, I wouldn't be having my university degree, 100%. So I think there are girls girls deserve a chance in education, and state has to take on that responsibility for people who can't afford education.
But in that argument, I believe there is an onus on the state to build up a capacity where all students who are undergoing primary or secondary education are able to get into universities, because only a very small proportion of A-level students get into state universities.
Sure. I think that
and also we don't have the capacity to, from the number of students that go out for A-levels, only a limited number that can enter into
state universities.
What about the rest? Then also, you have so much of Sri Lankan students going overseas to Malaysia, to countries like even like Bangladesh. And then the foreign the currency that is outflowing. If you had certain reputed universities in Sri Lanka, this the earnings that can be brought into this country. These are factors you shouldn't be shying away.
To add to that, I think these are case by case situations. Certainly there are opportunities in technology sharing and knowledge sharing that can come with foreign universities coming into Sri Lanka. I'm not denying that. But as a general policy, we support universities who are not coming here for profit-making businesses to come here and establish universities. That's not a problem.
But
the problem is
in essence private.
That is in essence private.
No, what I want to say is, but we also have a private sector in education.
Okay. Yes.
I think we all have experiences of that.
Understood.
That is basically ripping off parents, and that has to be stopped. And NPP will make sure that there are regulations in place.
Yes, and a high quality of education is delivered where value for money is given to
wherever it is, whether it's the state or the private sector.
Understood. So I had a very fruitful conversation with my two guests tonight, two legal eagles representing the Savagin Sanapalawege and the National People's Power, Attorney at Law Lihini Fernando and also Attorney at Law Lakmali Hemachandra. Thank you very much, ladies, for joining me this evening and having a very expansive conversation on all things leading up to the presidential election on the 21st. And we wish you all the best from our network for your respective campaigns.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
And that's the way it was on Face to Face. Do take care. See you on a brand new edition of Face to Face later this week.